Hi everyone, it's the day after Budget 2020, a budget that the Finance Minister Grant Robertson has called Rebuilding Together, and it's been a budget that is all about jobs for people. We are very much aware that the past couple of months, as New Zealand has come together to deal with COVID-19, has been an incredibly difficult period, that the effect of COVID-19 here in New Zealand but everywhere else in the world has been that of a major shock to our economy and our society. The good news is that because our team of 5 million, and through the leadership of our Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern and the government, we have made enormous progress on the path towards eliminating COVID-19. We have been able to minimise the number of deaths, the amount of human suffering in our society compared to other countries of a similar size. And what's more, by working together so effectively to combat COVID and stamp it out, we give ourselves the best possible opportunity to rebuild and to recover. We're not one of those countries who still faces many months potentially of significant waves of COVID-19 coming through and creating further disruption. So this budget is about saying, yes, we've got to a good place, but we do not underestimate the scale of the challenge ahead of us. The economic impact on New Zealand is unprecedented. The projections of a drop of economic growth of around about 20% we have not in the coming quarter are numbers that we have not seen before in New Zealand, and this is playing out all over the world. So our job as government is to make sure that we are doing everything that we can to support the recovery and to support the rebuild. And one important point I'll make on that, and that Grant Robertson has made as well, is that as we go about this rebuild process, it's not about putting things back necessarily to exactly how they were before. Grant makes the point that if your house burns down in a fire, you don't rebuild it exactly the same way that it was originally built 20 or 30 years ago. You look at the challenges, the opportunities and the problems that we face now, and then you build a house that's fit for purpose. And so it is with our economy as we begin this rebuild process. Many things in our economy were going well before COVID, but we know that there are long-standing problems around New Zealand's lack of productivity, around child poverty, around the problems in our housing market. And these are things that we have an opportunity now to address as we rebuild together. And that is what this budget is about. The number one priority, as I said, is around jobs. So what we see in Budget 2020 is an unprecedented and massive investment in jobs for New Zealanders. The budget sets up a $50 billion COVID rebuild fund that will go into supporting the rebuild and making sure that we support the economic recovery and provide and protect as many jobs as possible for New Zealanders. The Treasury predicts that unemployment is likely to peak at just under 10% a little bit later this year, which is a huge impact and will have a big effect on the lives of many New Zealanders. But what the Treasury has also modelled is that with the impact of the $50 billion fund and the initiatives that we are supporting in this budget, we have the potential to get back to a low unemployment rate of around about 4%, which is where we were before COVID, within 2 years, which would be an extraordinary effort. And so that is where our focus is. So within that $50 billion package, there are a range of different areas in which investment and support is going into. Obviously, over the last 10 weeks or so, we've had the wage subsidy program. That has been a massive investment in protecting jobs and keeping people connected to their employer. And in the space of the 10 weeks or so that it's been running, it has already paid out about $11 billion in just that short period to support New Zealanders and to keep money flowing through our economy. We know that when the wage subsidy scheme expires after its original 12-week period, there will still be a need for additional support because many businesses, even though we've now moved to level 2, are still going to have a really hard time going forward. So we want to provide that support to those businesses with their biggest cost and to their employees to make sure that they still have income. So we will have a new, more targeted wage subsidy scheme which will last for 10 weeks following the end of the existing wage subsidy scheme. And it's going to apply to firms that in the month preceding have had a 50% hit on their income. So those firms who have found it really, really difficult through this period, and you can think of the sectors who have been especially badly affected, places like hospitality, tourism and retail, where they've had that big 50% or more hit on their incoming revenue, will have further support, basically on the same basis, through a wage subsidy scheme that lasts for another 10 weeks. That's an additional $3.2 billion investment that we are making through this budget. Again, it helps the employees, it makes sure that they stay connected to their employer, it makes sure that they have income, and it helps the employer, particularly small businesses, because wage costs are generally the biggest cost that they face, and it helps them to keep their valued employees on board. Some other really important initiatives in the budget around jobs. This one I think is just absolutely critical. It's a $1.4 billion investment in the trades and apprenticeships. We know that as we rebuild, we don't want to be in the situation where we have a generation of young people who lose jobs because of the economic hit of COVID and just get put on the socio-economic scrap heap. And when Grant Robertson spoke about this issue really passionately in the House, actually, he referenced the fact that when we came out of that big period of economic decline in the late 80s and early 90s, we had tens or hundreds of thousands of young people who lost their jobs and were just kind of forgotten about by the system. We cannot have that happen again. It's wrong and it's unjust, and it sets up decades and generations potentially of social and economic damage in our society. We will not see that happen under our watch. So this $1.4 billion package for trades and apprenticeships will make sure that many apprenticeships, particularly in key areas that are going to be important in the rebuild, thinking about hospitality, tourism, construction, we're going to make them free. We're going to say to young people that if you want to build a career in this area, we're going to support you to do that. We're going to say to the employers that if you're employing apprentices now, we're going to support you with additional support so that you don't lay off those apprentices in the coming period. And we're also going to support you to take on more apprenticeships into the future. So it's not only about the immediate recovery, it's about actually looking forward to the future of these young people and the future of New Zealand as a country that has a productive, well-trained workforce that can drive forward economic growth and prosperity in the future. So I'm really excited about that policy. There's also some really innovative stuff here that brings together different objectives that are important to us. So $1 billion is allocated to a jobs fund focused around environmental initiatives. We know that we've got huge environmental challenges out there, streams that need cleaning up, sediment that needs to be cleared, massive problems with wilding pines and pest populations. Well, the $1 billion in this fund is going to support people to move into jobs in those areas, so that not only are we providing people with meaningful work, we're actually tackling some of the environmental challenges that we face as well. People might remember Task Force Green, which was launched in the 1990s and has actually continued through to this day. This is going to be a massively amped up version of Task Force Green that will potentially provide jobs to thousands of New Zealanders while making significant improvements to our environment as well. In this budget as well, we're not forgetting about those long-standing challenges that New Zealand faces. And we know that one of the biggest problems that has built up over a number of years has been the shortage of homes for people, particularly people on lower incomes. So I was absolutely thrilled to see a commitment in this budget to building 8,000 new state homes for Kiwi, state and transitional homes for Kiwi families. I know that in my electorate of Mount Roskill, we have a big build program underway at the moment. We're building hundreds of new state houses, but there is huge demand there for people who need a decent, safe and affordable place for their families to live. And obviously with an investment like this, which is in the vicinity of several $1 billion, it's about providing decent, safe and affordable homes for those families. But also in the process of building 8,000 new homes, we create a huge number of jobs for New Zealanders in the trades, particularly around construction. So that's an important part of the rebuild process as well. It's going to keep many Kiwis employed. We're also looking after the needs of our children at this time. People might remember that last year we launched the Food in Schools program, which was rolled out, this was at the budget last year, rolled out at a pilot level initially in a number of areas where there was a really high level of need for our kids to get extra support to make sure that they were well fed. Budget 2020 rolls us out to 200,000 of our kids in disadvantaged communities who we need to make sure get a decent feed each day. The schools who have piloted this, and particularly I think the example is in Flaxmere, have found that it has an enormous effect on the well-being of those children and their ability to learn well at school as well. So I'm really excited about this and excited to be able to go and work with schools in Mount Roskill as well, who might have kids who are going to benefit from this program. That is going to be, I think, really significant for many children and families. There's a lot in this budget, hundreds of initiatives, and one of the things I want to make really clear that's different about this budget from other budgets that have happened after an economic shock is that we're not going down the austerity road. That is the wrong response in terms of the welfare and well-being of our people, and it is the wrong response economically as well. We're in a good position to face down this challenge because this government has been responsible with the books. We've driven down net debt below 20% of our GDP. We've been running budget surpluses. We have the ability to withstand a shock like this and now make the investments that are necessary. If we, at this point, made cuts to important services for New Zealanders, not only does that have a real effect on Kiwis and their families, but it actually has a negative effect in terms of the economic recovery. That's what happened in the early 90s. The national government of that period ran an austerity program, a bit like the Conservative government after the GFC in the UK, and that actually drives down your economic growth and your ability to respond and recover. We actually need people who have cash in their pockets, who aren't on the bones of their backsides, to be able to go out and spend and keep businesses and keep jobs going in our economy. And there was one thing in this budget to me that was really symbolic of this. Now, after the global financial crisis, the incoming national government of that time, in the 2009 budget, I think it was, made a range of cuts to some really important social and community programs. And one of them that really hit a lot of our communities was adult and community education, commonly known as night school. And this is that great Kiwi tradition that I think at that stage had been going for over 100 years of adults being able to go usually to their local school in the evenings and learn important skills. And often it was an important mode of social connection, really critical for a lot of new migrant communities in terms of their integration with the community. And often it was second chance education. It was people who perhaps had lost their jobs, perhaps had fallen on hard times, and wanted to develop some skills and confidence to be able to get out there again and find a new job in a new area. And so it was this incredibly short-sighted thing of the national government of that period to cut, I think it was about $13 million, not a huge amount in terms of the government's overall budget, from adult community education at that time. And it's meant that in a number of communities, including in Mount Roskill, we've lost adult and community education. Mount Roskill Grammar School sort of carried on for a number of years and pulled together scraps of money from here or there to keep it going because they knew it was important, but they couldn't sustain it. And last year, adult and community education shut down at Mount Roskill Grammar School. I'm really looking forward to being able to go back and talk with schools like Mount Roskill Grammar and say, we're actually going to back you to be running adult and community education again to support some really fantastic initiatives for people in our communities and to support people to have a bit of hope to be able to relearn and re-engage again as well. And I just thought, well, that's a small initiative. It's not up there with the $3 billion going into the wage subsidy scheme or the $1.4 billion for trades and apprenticeships or the billions of dollars for new homes. It says something about the different character and soul of this budget, that it's about rebuilding together. As we come out of the deep economic and social shock of COVID-19, our government, this government, and me and my colleagues as Labour MPs are not going to see New Zealanders left behind. We are going to do this together. I'll just end with a shout out to our Minister of Finance, Grant Robertson, who has put this budget together in extraordinary conditions and had to completely recraft a budget that had been built up carefully over a year and was probably ready to be signed off in about March when COVID-19 hit. He's done it with a care for the well-being of New Zealanders. He's done it in a way that means that we also have fiscal headroom to respond to future challenges and future waves if they happen as well. So it's a budget which really speaks to my values as a Labour MP, being about the well-being of people and about looking to building a better future for everyone. And as the headline says, doing that rebuild together. I hope this has been a useful introduction to some of the key themes in the budget. There's a lot more in there. And if you've got questions or comments or anything you'd like to discuss, please feel free to leave a comment and I'll do my best to get through those and respond to any questions that you have. I think that's about enough for me. I've certainly gone on for more than my customary minute or so in these updates, and I hope that, like me, you can see that this is a budget which helps New Zealand to move forward together. Cheers.